Hi, I'm Pastor Steve from Plumpton Community Church. We're continuing on with our discussion about worldviews, Christian worldview versus secular humanism, and the impact that secular humanism is having on the Western world today. I'm going to read out a verse from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. All right, so we see today that there is a battle going on for the hearts and minds of people's beliefs, what they would believe and what they will follow. It's happening in Australia and Western nations, other nations as well, obviously, but primarily in the Western nation, it's a battle between the Christian worldview and secular humanism. As I've said before, most of the West used to have a Christian worldview, but that has slowly been changed over the last several decades. One of the things that I want to talk about today is the fact that our political system and our educational system has pretty much been taken over by secular humanism or political correctness, and there is a battle going on today between the way that we govern ourselves in the West. Now, most of us will understand that in the West we have a form of government called democracy. Not perfect, but it's better than the alternatives that are out there. We in Australia and America, England and Britain and Canada and even European countries and other places as well, this form of government called democracy means that we have elections every 3 to 4 years where we get to choose our leaders. We have freedom of movement, freedom of association. We can belong to a particular group if we want to. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of gathering together, in different ways as we see fit. We have freedom to go where we want. This is all part of democracy. Now, the other form of government that is prevailing in some countries is communism or socialism, and then of course you've got Islamic worldviews as well, with Islamic governments. But primarily today I want to talk about the influence of secular humanism through communism or socialism. Now, for those of you who don't know your history, up until about 1989, the world was divided between, in the West, democracy, freedom of expression, worship, freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and so forth, and communism, which was an oppressive government which did not allow freedom of thought. The government told you what to think. The government sort of basically, even if it didn't ban religion, it controlled it, and people went to prison because they believed in God. You were not allowed to have a different opinion to the government at that time. You weren't free to travel as freely as what we are now. Things that was very oppressive, and there was sort of like this battling between the two worldviews. And then in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. This wall had been put up to keep separate between East Berlin and West Berlin, East Germany, West Germany. And that wall came down and communism fell in the Eastern European nations, and freedom began to come again, and there was, great celebrating and that. And everybody thought that communism and socialism had had its day and the world was entering a new phase of freedom. And to some degree it did, religious freedom came into Russia and the Soviet Union, as it was called then, and into East Germany and many of these other places that were like Poland and other nations that were under communist rule. But in recent times, there has been a move to revive this type of government, and it's happening in Western nations. And tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but I'm just trying to lay the groundwork for that we need to be aware that this is going on. And as I'm just going to finish off on the scripture that we started with, that we need to be able to understand these things so that we can cast down those false arguments that are against God and bring all those thoughts captive to God. Because basically all this stuff is a battle between God and evil, and the right and the wrong. I'm Pastor Steve. I hope you have a great day. God bless.